Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. You're watching the News Night and I'm Deepthi Sachdeva. Today we are talking of the trade winds because the trade winds are quite literally blowing, and somewhere, between the White House and the Raisina Hill, you also could have fireworks that may fly or history may be made. The India-US trade talks are heating up, and what a lot of insiders say now is that a breakthrough could actually come any moment. It could come sooner rather than later. But this isn't just a love fest. It is a lot of hard bargaining. It is strategic tussles and a lot of sharp elbows at the table. President Trump, who's back in the spotlight, remember, is calling out India's quote-unquote high tariffs. Yet, this is the same man, and you would recall this, who's known for literally tearing up deals and signing them with a grin. A disruptor? Absolutely. He's one. He's a disruptor, but also a deal maker, especially when you have 140 crore Indians who cannot be ignored. That is the might of the country. So will America stand with India as one or stand aside? It's a fascinating story, equally important. So we here on the News Night are decoding that with the best panel of experts joining us. We'll tell you what this deal is about, what this means, what is the China connection here, what is it that you must keep in mind as consumers, and a lot more. So without wasting time, let me introduce our panel of guests. First up, joining us on this edition of the News Night, we have Jayant Krishna, the former Group CEO, the UK India Business Council, joining us. We'll also, in fact, be joined by him in just a moment, but I'm told Matt Klink, who's a Republican political strategist, is with us. Matt, thank you so much for your time. And before I even put out our straight questions, we must tell our viewers that this is a story that possibly could get bigger in the next few days to the next few weeks. We've seen a lot of important meetings, a lot of important conversations, and Matt, with your permission, I want to put out our straight questions, as the format of the show is, for our viewers to help understand what we are talking about. The first important question, and that is about this deal. Now, MAGA or MIGA? Which really wins? Now, make America great again or make India great again? You've seen that entire narrative that has been pushed in by two very, very strong popular leaders. So which will triumph? This brings us to our second straight question. Can the US even ignore India's 1.4 billion market under Trump? It's a huge market, a huge potential, something that obviously economies across the world do realize. Is India a partner or a pawn when it comes to the US trade talks? We will find that out also during the course of this conversation. This brings us to our next fourth straight question, and I'm glad Matt is smiling when you ask him that question, Matt. I'm just going to come to you in a moment. How long can Trump really resist India's demographic and digital edge? Because that is also where a lot of the story changes. You're looking at new options coming in, China no longer a preferred choice. How could that encompass the entire trade deal conversation? And this brings us to our fifth and final straight question. Will Trump, ladies and gentlemen, yield to India like he did to China? There is a sweet deal he is now wanting to ink with China. Could that happen vis-a-vis India also? It's a pleasure also now to be joined by Jayant Krishna, the former Group CEO of the UK India Business Council. Jayant, thank you so much for your time. And I will take 30 seconds opening comments with both our guests before we take you through more details of what this deal is. What does this entail? What are the numbers, the big numbers we will be talking about? So, Matt, why don't you go first and tell me?
Sound is very low. Can you increase
Okay, we will better that, Jayant. I hope my team has heard that. We'll better that audio level, Matt. You want to go first and tell me what will happen? What is your perspective on this big India-US deal?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. I think that it was more than symbolic. It was an indication of the strong partnership that the United States has with India, that Prime Minister Modi joined Donald Trump in the Oval Office for that meeting a number of months ago. And as Donald Trump has said, for domestic consumption and for global consumption, that the trade deals that the U.S. has entered into in the past weren't good deals for America. They were good deals for other country. That being said, they also know that the Trump administration has also said that earlier countries negotiating with the U.S. are going to get a better deal. And I think that ultimately the fact that the Trump administration and the Modi administration are close to announcing a deal is indicative of something that both MAGA and MIGA can claim victory on. and that it will be a very good trade deal that will hopefully last for a long time. And I think that America is smart enough to realize that China has eaten our lunch through a series of bad trade deals, and they've stolen from us. So we need to, India is a reliable partner.
All right, I just want to give the next 30 seconds to Jan because it's an important story that we'll decode with numbers. Like I said, Jan, MAGA or MIGA? Because Matt says that this could be a fine balancing between both.
See, any negotiation, is a balancing act. And in today's world, I've always been saying countries do not necessarily get what they deserve. They get what they negotiate. And India is the relationship between US and India is quite strategic. And India is now too big a market, expanding Indian market that you have. US desperately wants greater market access to it. And that's the reason it has been saying that, on major, the import duty on major items which are of interest to US to be exported to India or should go down. And also as US is looking at alternate supply chains, beyond China. India is the most suitable destination for that. Huge diaspora. How do you address Chinese economic aggression? So all these things, I think, US has to give
Jan,
the lead.
we'll open the story layer by layer as the promises to our viewers, and I'm requesting both for you and Matt to be a little patient with me. As first, we'll put our numbers on the screens because these are numbers that will help you understand what this story is all about. When you look at the tale of contrast, remember here is India, on the other side you have US, you have China. Now if you look at what's written just behind US and China, you will realize that with US we have a trade surplus, but when you come down to China, which is the other elephant in the room, you're talking of this trade deficit. These are important terms, whether or not you hold a fancy for economics, but when you look at these data, these bar graphics on your screens, now green is obviously indicating a surplus to you. And if you go to the red bar there, you will see that that is the real deficit we are talking about. Now, trade surplus, if you look at the financial years 24-25, you will see this trade surplus has gone up. So that is the kind of trade that India has had with the US, which is a surplus, and that surplus has gone upwards. On the other side is China, where you have a trade deficit. This is something, again, that has been discussed and spoken about. And if you look at the both financial year 24-25, ladies and gentlemen, you will see those numbers on your screens. This deficit has also gone up, right from $85.07 billion to a $99.20 billion. And this will tell you where really India is also looking at to doing a lot more interesting things. But what about the growth? What about the growth options? We'll put that out also on our screens because these are again important data to help you understand that where is this import and export balance really going. We are talking the India-US trade and the growth on both sides, as in vis-a-vis both India and the US. If you look at this, now in the year 2024-25, India's exports to the US grew by 11.6%. Again, you see an upward trajectory. We'll get our next pointer here to help you understand that imports also increased by an equal amount of a 7.44%. And this is why you have a surplus, because both these indicators are, remember, in green. And that is why, Matt, when you will look at all these important data, there is a larger conversation about a Mission 500. What really is this Mission 500? I want to bring up quickly those details because this is the ambitious target that has been set by India. Now, this is the trade volume that India wants to have by the year 2030. But in case you're wondering what is our trade volume right now, I want to get in that number also on our screens, and that will explain to you what is this Mission 500. Can it be achieved with two huge economies like both India and America? Now the 2023 numbers are at $190 billion. We want this to go up to 500. And do remember there is already a surplus. So Jayant, when you look at these numbers on your screens, is this workable? Can this happen? Does this benefit both the countries?
I think so. It's going to be a win-win for both the countries if we work out things which are equitable for both the nations. If you look at India today, it seeks relief from the 26% tariff, which was reciprocal tariff, which was levied on us on 2nd of February on the Liberation Day, and lot of Indian products which are exported to the US, right? A huge amount of expectation, exists, be it textiles, be it garments, be it leather goods, gems and jewelry, fertilizers, oil seeds, fruits, dry fruits, these kind of things, plastics. So I think, eventually, if the tariff of 26% remains there on these products, then Indian products will not be competitive there. Now, similarly, US also wants, has been exporting some products to India, and it has greater interest to, push that upwards. Some industrial products, automobiles, especially the electric vehicles, wines, petrochemicals, a lot of milk and dairy products, apples, other fruits, dry fruits, and even the genetically modified crops and seeds, So I think these are of prime interest for the US export to India, and therefore US has been trying that India lowers the import duty on these products so that it becomes these products, US products become more competitive in India. Okay. So I think this is an ongoing negotiation, and it's going well. And I feel, I think it'll essentially be a win-win. The bilateral trade agreement discussions have been going on well. I'm told, and there is and at the end of the day, US can't keep on antagonizing all nations, in one go, right? I mean, its trade war with China is public knowledge, right? Oh, yes. So how does the relationship eventually settle with India on tariff? I think it's anybody's guess,
Yes, that's a good point that you have made, but then this is Trump. Now, whether Trump is really want to be doing this or not, Matt, do you have an answer to this? You've seen what happened vis-a-vis China. Now, does this mean that India obviously is not just a favorable country when it comes to a lot of those trade, a lot of those numbers, but the point is that you need to be flexible. If Trump thinks about making America great again, India is also wanting to put its own interests first.
Yeah, of course. I think that any leader of a country who doesn't put his or her nation first is not going to hold that office for very long. And for Donald Trump, in negotiations with China, as you'll notice right now, China is not favored because, according to Trump, they have failed to adhere to the terms in the short term that they said that they were going to agree to. So, look, regarding the plan you outlined for a dramatically larger Indian trade with America, I think that so long as the terms of any trade deal are fair towards America, I mean, ideally, the perfect trade deal would be one where neither country has a trade surplus or a trade deficit. The goal is to get as close as possible. We produce things that India needs, and India produces things that we need. So I think that if we can strike good deals make for good friendships. And it is undeniable that America and India need to have a closer relationship as two of the world's largest democracies, especially with an increasingly aggressive China.
Nice. And Matt, I like the way you emphasized on deal, because yes, when it comes to Trump, it is a lot about deals. It's about tariffs. So that is the man talking business. Before I come back to both of these gentlemen, I want to look at key exports and imports, because that has also been discussed. So let me put those details now on our screens, which really are the key exports, key imports when it comes to both US and India. What really are the products we are talking about? We'll put them out on our screens in just a moment to help you understand. As you look at the larger landscape also, now the key Indian exports to US in 2024, drug formulations and biologicals, extremely important. The pharma sector, very, very keen right now to see where this deal really goes. This brings us to a second important pointer as far as this is concerned, the telecom instruments. Again, very significant. You're talking of the chips, the hardware, and a lot of other details. Precious, semi-precious stones, all these are part of key exports. As far as India and the US is concerned, petroleum products, let's not forget them. Critical also when it comes to the growth engine of any country, gold and other precious metals, all forming the part of the key Indian exports to the US. ready-made garments. This essentially includes a lot of cotton, and that is why when you will see a trade deal being worked out, these products possibly could get affected. How will they get affected? I will tell you that also in just a moment. Let's bring up now the other big detail. This is about the exports to the US. In the same year, 24-25, products of iron and steel, again significant when it comes to the economy, when it comes to construction sector and a lot of other details. Crude oil, don't forget crude oil. A lot really hinges also on crude oil. These are imports now, in fact, that we are talking about. So apart from the petroleum products, you're talking of coal, significant, and both Jayant and Matt would actually, agree that there is a substantial amount of trade when it comes to all these products. Cut and polished diamonds, again, they find an important place as far as this conversation between India and the US is concerned. Electric machinery, again, a next important point in terms of the hardware, in terms of a lot of other parts. Aircraft, spacecraft, and their parts, again, formed a major part of the US imports. Gold. Gold, again, has been a part of this entire conversation. And let me also quickly now tell you what happens when you will have a trade deal that is being struck. Clearly, you're looking at products that possibly could be covered under the deal, products that are not going to be covered under the deal, and what as a consumer, you the viewer, should be more concerned about. This is the impact on consumers, what may actually get cheaper. I'll begin from here. We are talking of fruits and nuts. We just spoke about them. The US dairy products like Danone, the American medical devices, all set to become cheaper in case you could be looking at a deal where possibly this could be a win-win scenario for both the countries. This will also include whiskey like Bourbon and Jack Daniels, and a lot of these high-end fashion brands possibly could also be looking at getting cheaper as far as this deal is concerned. This will now switch to also tell you more about what possibly could get expensive, because any deal will come with certain costs. What could actually get expensive? Don't forget, a lot of these global brands like Nike and Adidas are caught in the fallout because you have a lot of this coming in from Vietnam. Vietnam again has seen significant tariffs by the Trump administration. Electronics possibly could also get expensive in case you could be looking at this deal moving closer. The tech giant Apple already is facing a lot of pressure, and I'm not going into details because I'm sure you, the viewer, knows about this. A lot of imported vehicles and parts, again, possibly could feel the heat, and this is again where you could see their prices going up. Now, Jayant, in your opinion, when we are looking at how this story impacts today a consumer who's watching this broadcast in India or anywhere else, what would you tell them? Top 3 things that they should keep in mind, Jayant.
So, first of all, let me pick up a thread from what you said, the Apple, right? President Trump has said very, very clearly that, let Apple manufacturing shift from China and India to the US. And at best, he says, whatever Apple phones are for Indian market could be produced and manufactured in India. Rest of them have to happen in the US. But let me just go back a bit. Why did Apple, manufacturing go to China and then subsequently to India? Not because US loves China or loves India. It happened because it made business sense for Apple to manufacture them, at a cheaper rate. And so today, if Apple has to listen to President Trump and shift some of it back to the US, the manufacturing back to the US, it's not going to happen that seamlessly, no matter how much you protect through tariff and so on and so forth, because the competitive edge US has lost to manufacture them inexpensively in the US. So US has the technology, it has the IPR, and manufacturing is somebody else's core competence. So in international trade, it does not matter, absolute advantage is not, what is important. What is important is the relative advantage of nations. Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage of nations used to be there. Michael Porter has talked about from the Harvard Business School, which has talked about, the competitive advantage of companies, And so I think all these things have to be kept in mind. And I would think India has to keep, has to really think about, metal commodities to a large extent. That's very, very important because exports of these products to US makes a lot of sense. And if US has 26% duty, then the things wouldn't fly at all. Okay. The second Yeah. So I think there are a few categories like that which US has to be very, very, which have to be discussed very, very threadbare while the negotiations are on trade. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And because Jayant hasn't spoken about China, I want Matt to deal with the China story here. Now, there is a reason why the China angle here, Matt, becomes very critical. Also because of the fact that China possibly is losing a lot of favor. You're looking at a lot of that market moving towards India in terms of product, in terms of services, and a lot of other leverage. So do you think that that particular deal that the US is wanting to strike with China could also enable India?
Absolutely. I think that, I'm not an expert on trade negotiations, but I do know a fair bit about American politics. Donald Trump's whole reason from a trade perspective, and by the way, he has been a strong supporter of tariffs for at least the last 20 years, is that America needs to make certain things domestically, if for no other reason than for economic security and national security. Case in point being pharmaceuticals, and obviously producing more energy domestically. I think that those two things are things that America is we need to move more pharmaceuticals back home, and we need to produce more here from a petroleum perspective. But looking at the rest of the world, the bottom line is, as China's middle class grows, it's becoming more expensive to produce things there. That's why production was moving, or manufacturing was moving to other countries, excuse me. So I think that India will benefit from some of this. But look, India is going to look at this, I would imagine, the same way. There are certain things that Prime Minister Modi realizes that India needs to produce inside the country, because it's important to the domestic security and economic security in India. And I think that that's where the push and pull in these trade negotiations comes down to where rubber meets the road. So, look, Donald Trump is ultimately a deal maker. If we can strike a deal that net, he can claim victory, and Prime Minister Modi is not going to sign a bad deal just because it's a deal. They will find a way to both declare victory, how both countries will be better off from this deal, and ultimately China, because this is a zero-sum game, China will end up losing with a better America-India trade deal.
All right. I think these are very important and interesting points that have been raised by both Matt and Jan. But I want to talk about one of the very important things that a lot of our viewers have been wanting us to discuss, and that is whether India needs America more or America needs India more. So I'm just going to put out some details to help you understand why we believe here on the News Night that it is America, ladies and gentlemen, that needs India more. Because look at the size we are talking of. 140 billion. Now we are talking of 1.4 billion people. That is the might of India. So 1.4 billion reasons India's massive market is too big. It is too big for the US to ignore. That has to be the first important reason. This brings us to our second important reason, the China check, something that Matt also just alluded towards. India is America's best bet right now to counterbalance China, and hence it is India that possibly does enjoy a lot of significant leverage when it comes to this deal. This brings us to our third important point, which is the factory shift, which we've been talking about, which a lot of you also are aware of, that as the supply chains move out of China, where do people go? They come to India. And this is where the story changes. This is again where India gets its heft. This brings us to our fourth important point, Jayant, and that is about the tech edge. The tech edge that a lot of people, they do realize, but they don't talk about it that often. The US innovation needs Indian scale, talent, and demand. Again, something that you could be looking at India delivering. Because I do not have much time, Jan, but can I give you the last 10 seconds to close your comments as you will be looking at this? 10 seconds.
If you look at the top 20 tech companies in Silicon Valley, right? Yes. 12 of them have CEOs of Indian origin, and they are the people who did their first degrees here. If you look at the artificial intelligence story, all the research and development that's happening in the US, on an average, 60 to 70% of the teams of software coders and other professionals are of Indian origin, So I think, both, to my mind, both the countries need each other. But I think US at this point of time can't do without India at all. That's my feeling,
Okay, Matt, you want to take 5 seconds? Only 5.
Absolutely. No, look, we're two strong democracies need each other, and we
Yes.
can both craft a solution where both countries win.
All right. All right. Brief but very, very succinct. I must say thank you to both Jayant and Matt for their time, for their perspective on this extremely important story. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's also time for us to get you Newsnight's parting shot. So when you have the world's biggest democracy and the world's biggest economy, and they are talking trade, it is more than tariffs. This is a global reset. With, remember, Trump's unpredictability that is back in play and India's leverage that continues to grow by the day, this deal isn't just about economics anymore. It is about who really shapes the next world order. Will it be a partnership or a power play? I think that is what will decide how this story will move. Trump could be the wild card, but we do know that India does enjoy a lot of leverage, and India's rising clout essentially will decide what happens. How will this deal be struck? The next handshake, in fact, is going to be very, very significant. As we request you to stay with us, follow the money, like they say, and watch the moves. Because the next handshake, ladies and gentlemen, could change everything for you, for me, and the world. Thank you for watching. Good night.